Hi, this is Professor William Wagner, and it's Faith and Freedom Friday here at Salt Lake Global and the Great Lakes Justice Center. Today, I want to just continue discussing what is happening in Canada. There are peaceful protesters up there, as you know, with the truckers, and some have been arrested for their nonviolent, peaceful expression, speech, and ideas of the kind that the government authorities disagree with. And that seems to be the sole basis for the government exercising these extraordinary powers, forcing private companies to assist in the removing of the peaceful protesters, taking the private property of protesters, threatening to freeze bank accounts. For Americans who have a First Amendment and a freedom of speech and free exercise of thought and conscience, we sometimes wonder, well, how can they be doing this? And so what I want to do is explain a little bit how it works in Canada. In Canada, they've got, something called the Charter of Rights. And the Charter is like our Bill of Rights that articulates what the civil liberties of Canadian citizens are. And they're supposed to be so important that they're supposed to give some kind of at least protection from a government regime that acts against them. And all Canadian provinces, except for Quebec, have adopted that charter. Now, what is important to understand, though, is that the Canadian Charter does protect freedom of speech and things like this, but you'd think, well, then that's what's happening here. How come the Canadian government is allowed to interfere with these speech? Well, because the Canadian Charter doesn't contain protection of due process, for example. It doesn't contain protection for property with regard to due process, rather. And so there are some things like that are very, very different. And moreover, some of the Canadian courts have taken, just like in the American system, taken and diminished many of these fundamental freedoms that we take for granted here, that we can no longer take for granted. And the other thing that's different in Canada is that there are a hierarchy of rights, and so some rights are considered more important. And of course, you can imagine, sexual rights are considered the most important and have to be able to, in another context that we can talk about on a different time, will supersede other things like the free exercise of religion. But my point is that in Canada, the government can end up overriding these rights with legislation. So unlike in the United States, where a decision by our Supreme Court can only change if we amend the Constitution, if the Canadian Supreme Court did uphold these freedom of speech rights, still the government could come in through Parliament and override it. And so that's real problematic. So my point is, there's already this context where the government regime kind of presupposes that we're from the government, so we know what's best for you. And now, one of the things that I have not heard talked about anywhere, though, are Canada's international obligations under treaties to which Canada is a signatory. For example, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and its optional protocol, that provides specifically, and I'm going to just read the quote here: everyone shall have the right to hold opinions without interference, end quote. That means they have a absolute right to the freedom of expression, freedom to seek and impart different kinds of information, all kinds, no matter whether they're doing it in writing or whether they're doing it verbally, or any other way. And so in addition to Article 19 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 18 provides that everyone that is a signatory to this treaty, of which Canada is a signatory, shall have the right to freedom of thought and conscience. That doesn't seem to matter. And so the point that I want you to take as we finish here is that, freedom is precious and it can be lost. Here we've got a government regime that is defying its international obligations under treaties that protect a person's right to freedom of expression, that are defying the rights in its own charter, and seem to be doing so just because they disagree with the message that they are seeking to suppress. Imagine if American authorities came in and said, I'm going to freeze your bank account unless you stop expressing ideas with which I disagree. Folks, it's time to wake up and make sure that through our elected representatives, we let them know that they must stand for us, the people they represent, and make sure the government understands the rule of law that says we can only act if we have authority to act, and we cannot act in ways that interfere with the fundamental right of a citizen to express themselves, especially when we're talking about these peaceful, nonviolent expressions of public policy preferences with which those in the government regime, those in power, disagree with. So until next time, this is Professor William Wagner from Salt Lake Global and the Great Lakes Justice Center, and this has been Faith and Freedom Friday. God bless you.